I lied to my daughter that my pension was only $1,500 instead of $4,000 to test her love. Instead of supporting me, she and her brother-in-law immediately started counting on my money, offering to help me sell the house. But what they did next shocked me to the core. Just listen. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. My fork trembled slightly as I cut another piece of Alice's roast chicken. The dining room felt smaller than usual, family photos watching from their frames like silent judges. I'd rehearsed this moment for days, but now the words stuck in my throat like dry bread. "This is delicious, sweetheart." The normalcy of the phrase felt like sandpaper against my conscience. Alice beamed from across the table, her marketing-polished smile bright as ever. "Thanks, Dad. I use Mom's recipe." She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "You've been quiet today? Everything okay?" This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you both." I set down my utensils, clasping my hands to stop their trembling. "I got some news from the pension office this week." Cody looked up from his phone, suddenly interested. Alice's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a micro-tightening around her eyes that I might have missed if I hadn't been watching so carefully. "What kind of news?" Alice's voice carried just the right note of concern, but her posture had changed, straighter, more alert. I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "They're making cuts. Administrative restructuring, they called it." The lie tasted bitter. "My monthly pension is being reduced from $4,000 to $1,500. The silence that followed was deafening. Alice's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down with mechanical precision. I watched her face cycle through emotions. Shock, concern, but underneath it all, something else, something calculating. "Dad, that's terrible." Her hand reached across the table toward mine, but stopped just short. "How can they do that legally?" "Budget shortfalls," I continued, each word a small betrayal of my own integrity. "Affects all retirees hired before 1985. Cody had fully abandoned his phone now, leaning forward with sudden engagement. "What about legal action? That seems like breach of contract." I studied his face as I shook my head. "Already looked into it. Nothing we can do." Alice was doing math in her head. I could see it in the slight movement of her lips, the way her gaze had gone distant. When she refocused on me, her expression was perfectly crafted sympathy. "Oh, Dad, how will you manage on such a small amount?" The words were right, but something in her tone felt rehearsed, professional, like she was delivering bad news to a client. "I'll figure something out." I pushed food around my plate, no longer hungry. "Might have to sell the house, find something smaller." That got a reaction. Alice's eyes widened, genuine surprise this time. "Sell the house? Mom's house? I can't afford the property taxes and maintenance on $1,500 a month." This part wasn't entirely a lie. Even with my actual pension, the house was becoming a financial stretch. Cody cleared his throat. "What about the equity? I mean, you bought that place for what? $60,000 in the 80s? It's got to be worth $400 now, maybe more." There it was, the first glimpse behind the mask. Not, "How can we help Dad keep his home?" but, "How much money are we talking about?" Alice shot her husband a look that was equal parts warning and calculation. "Cody's just thinking practically, Dad, we want to make sure you're taken care of." "Of course," I murmured, filing away every micro-expression, every telling pause. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but I was no longer fully present. Part of me was documenting Alice's increasing focus on financial specifics, Cody's helpful suggestions that all involve liquidating assets, the way they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. When I finally announced I should head home, Alice hugged me at the door. It felt different somehow, more perfunctory, like she was already mentally moving past the emotional aspect and into problem-solving mode. "We'll figure this out together, Dad," she said, her voice warm but her eyes distant. "Maybe you could move in with us temporarily while you look for a smaller place." Cody nodded enthusiastically. "The guest room's always available." I drove home through the gray Seattle afternoon, their words echoing in my mind. On the surface, everything they'd said was supportive, caring, appropriate. But underneath, my phone buzzed as I pulled into my driveway. A text from Alice. "Been thinking about your situation. Let's talk tomorrow about options." I stared at the message for a long moment. 12 hours since learning of their father's financial crisis, and Alice was already making plans, efficient, practical, and somehow that efficiency felt more like a knife than comfort. As I unlocked my front door, stepping into the quiet house that had felt like home for 37 years, I wondered if I was being unfair. Maybe Alice was just trying to help. Maybe I was seeing calculation where there was only concern. But deep in my chest, a cold certainty was taking root. The test was working exactly as I'd feared it would. The landline's shrill ring cut through Monday morning silence like a blade through fabric. I'd been nursing the same cup of coffee for an hour, staring at the newspaper without reading a single word. 7 days had passed since that dinner, and Alice's carefully crafted concern still echoed in my memory. "Dad, how are you holding up?" Her voice carried that professional warmth I'd begun to recognize, the tone she probably used with difficult clients. "Managing fine, sweetheart." I settled deeper into my recliner, phone cradled against my shoulder. "Just finished breakfast." "I've been thinking about your situation all week." There was rustling in the background, papers perhaps. "Have you looked into any assistance programs? There might be something available for seniors in your position." Seniors in my position, not dad who's struggling, or my father who needs help. Seniors in my position. "I haven't had time to research much," I replied, watching a sparrow fight the wind outside my window. "Well, I could help with that. Maybe come over Wednesday and we could go through your expenses together. Make sure you're maximizing every dollar." The offer sounded generous, caring, but underneath the words, I heard something else entirely. The eager efficiency of someone preparing to examine assets. "That's thoughtful of you, Alice." "It's what families do." A pause, then Cody's voice in the background, too muffled to understand. "Cody says there might be tax benefits you're missing too. We want to make sure you're not leaving money on the table." We hung up after 10 minutes of practical suggestions and caring reassurances. I remained in my chair long after the dial tone stopped, feeling like I'd just been professionally consulted rather than comforted by my daughter. Wednesday brought rain and another call. "Dad, something came up at work. Can we postpone our visit until this weekend?" Alice's voice had a distracted quality, like she was multitasking while speaking. "Of course." I kept my disappointment carefully measured. These things happen. "But I've been thinking about your budget situation. Do you have all your monthly expenses written down somewhere? It would help if I could see the complete picture before we meet." Complete picture. Financial vocabulary was creeping into every conversation now. I keep track of things mentally, mostly. "Oh, Dad." A gentle laugh that somehow felt condescending. "That won't work for proper budgeting. You need everything documented, every subscription, every utility, every insurance payment. When we meet, we should create a comprehensive spreadsheet." The conversation lasted 12 minutes. 11 of those minutes focused on organizing my fictional financial crisis with the methodical thoroughness of an accountant preparing for an audit. Friday's call came during dinner. I'd been heating leftover soup, the kind Margaret used to make from scratch, but which now came from a can. "Just checking in," Alice announced, though her tone suggested this was anything but casual. "Have you given any more thought to selling the house?" "Some." I stirred the soup, watching steam rise like small ghosts. "It's a big decision." "Of course it is. But Dad, you have to be practical about this. That house is worth serious money, and you can't afford to maintain it on $1,500 a month." Her words came faster now, more urgent. "I've been doing some research. There are some lovely senior communities in the area, much more manageable. And with the equity from the house, you'd have a nice nest egg for years to come. Have you been looking at specific places?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Just preliminary research. I want to be prepared when you're ready to make decisions. That's what responsible children do. They stay ahead of their parents' needs." Responsible children. The phrase sat heavy in my stomach like undigested food. The weekend passed quietly. No visit materialized. Saturday and Sunday stretched empty and silent, filled only with the growing certainty that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with my daughter. By the following Monday, I no longer questioned whether my test was working. The only question remaining was how much truth I was prepared to uncover. My reflection stared back from the kitchen window as evening shadows lengthened across the yard Margaret had planted 20 years ago. The man looking back appeared older than I remembered, more tired, but his eyes held something new, a cold clarity that hadn't been there before. The phone rang again. Alice's name appeared on the caller ID like a scheduled appointment. I let it ring 3 times before answering, suddenly curious about how urgent her concern really was. Saturday's decision to visit Alice came after a week of analyzing those calculated phone calls. Each conversation felt more like financial consultation than family concern. Alice answered the door with flour-dusted hands. "Dad, this is a surprise." The house smelled of cinnamon, Margaret's apple pie recipe. I hung my jacket on the coat hook and followed her to the kitchen, where coffee waited. "How have you been managing?" she asked, pouring 2 cups. "Same as always, though I appreciate your calls this week." Something flickered across her expression, too quick to interpret. 20 minutes of careful conversation passed. Work updates, yard maintenance, grocery shopping, but tension hummed underneath like electrical wires in a storm. "Excuse me a moment," I said. "Bathroom?" When I returned, Cody stood beside the coffee table holding papers. My jacket lay across the sofa where I'd left it. "Wayne." His voice carried new weight. "What's this?" He held up my bank statement. The actual pension deposit. $4,000, clear as daylight. My blood turned to ice. "These numbers don't match what you told us," Cody continued, his tone hardening. Alice appeared, drying her hands. "What numbers?" Cody handed her the statement. I watched confusion melt into betrayal on her face. $4,000? Her voice rose. "Dad, you said 1,500. You said they cut your pension." "Alice, I can explain." "Explain what?" Cody interrupted sharply. "Why you lied to our faces, made us worry sick while you're perfectly comfortable." "It wasn't like that." "What was it like then?" Alice's professional voice cracked. "Because it looks like you played some sick game with us." "I wanted to see." I stopped. How could I explain without sounding paranoid? "See what?" Cody pressed. "If we'd take advantage, if we only cared about your money?" His accuracy hit like a physical blow. "We trusted you," Alice said, tears forming. "I spent sleepless nights worried. I researched programs, made lists to help stretch every dollar." "Alice, don't." She raised her hand. "I can't believe you do this to us." Cody nodded grimly. "We offered help, opened our home, and you tested us like strangers trying to scam you." "That's not how I meant it." "How did you mean it?" His voice carried controlled anger. "Honest people don't lie about financial emergencies. They don't manipulate the people who love them." Every explanation sounded defensive. They had me trapped in my own deception's logic, and worse, they were right. I had lied. I had manipulated. I had tested their love with false crisis. "We need time to process this," Alice said, composure returning like armor. "I think you should go home, Dad." I looked at her face and saw a stranger, hurt, angry, disappointed in ways that cut deeper than anticipated. "Alice, please. Just go." Her voice broke. "Please." I retrieved my jacket from Cody's hands. Our eyes met briefly. In his gaze, I saw something chilling. Satisfaction that looked disturbingly like victory. Alice stared at the bank statement like it contained nuclear launch codes. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. 4,000. The words came out strangled. "Your pension is $4,000 a month." "Alice, let me explain." 4,000. Her voice cracked like breaking glass. "While I lay awake at night, calculating how you'd buy groceries on 1,500. She began pacing. Back and forth across the living room carpet, the bank statement clutched in her fists like evidence at a murder trial. "Do you understand what you put me through?" Each word came faster, sharper. "I called assistance programs. I researched budget meal plans. I made spreadsheets of your expenses. I wanted to see..." "See what?" Alice whirled around, her professional mask completely gone. "See if I'd steal from you? See if I'd abandon you to starve?" Cody nodded solemnly from his position by the fireplace. "That's exactly what he did, Alice. He tested us like we were con artists. I researched senior communities." Alice's voice rose to near hysteria. "I spent hours online looking at assisted living facilities because I thought you couldn't afford the house anymore." The irony hit me like cold water. She'd been planning my future, planning where I'd live, how I'd survive, what I'd need, all based on a lie designed to test her motives. But her reaction... "I made lists," she continued, gesturing wildly. "Lists of ways to stretch every dollar. I called my friend Sarah, who works in social services to ask about programs you might qualify for. Alice, don't you Alice me. She jabbed the air with her finger. Do you know how embarrassing it was? Telling people my father might lose his house because his pension got cut? There it was. Embarrassment. Not concern for my well-being, but embarrassment about appearances. I felt so helpless, she continued, tears streaming now, watching my father face poverty while I couldn't do enough to help. And the whole time, she crumpled the statement in her hands. The whole time you were sitting on $4,000 a month, laughing at how gullible your daughter was. I wasn't laughing. No? Cody stepped forward. Then what were you doing, Wayne? Because from where we stand, you played us for fools. Alice collapsed into the armchair, her head in her hands. I can't believe this. I actually can't believe you would do this to me. Her shoulders shook with sobs that sounded more furious than heartbroken. I planned to have you move in with us if things got worse, she said through her tears. I was figuring out how to convert the guest room into something more permanent. I was ready to take care of you. The words should have touched me, should have proved her love. Instead, they revealed something else entirely. She'd been making plans for my life, decisions about my future, arrangements that would put her in control of my situation, my finances, my daily existence. You manipulated me. Alice lifted her head, her eyes red but blazing. You made me feel guilty about not doing enough. You made me question whether I was a good daughter. That wasn't my intention. What was your intention then? She stood up abruptly. Because right now, it looks like you enjoyed watching me scramble to figure out how to save you from a crisis that never existed. Cody moved to Alice's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. She's been worried sick, Wayne, lost sleep, lost focus at work, all because she thought her father was in trouble. Lost focus at work, Alice repeated, seizing on the phrase. Do you know what that could have cost me? I have a presentation next week that I've barely prepared for because I've been consumed with your fake financial emergency. There it was again. The practical concerns, the professional implications, the personal cost to her success and comfort. Not once had she mentioned worry about my happiness, my health, my emotional state, only the inconvenience, the embarrassment, the disruption to her plans and productivity. I think you need to leave, Alice said suddenly, her voice dropping to dangerous quiet. I need time to process what kind of person would do this to their own daughter. I looked at her face, really looked at it, searched for any trace of the little girl who used to climb into my lap with scraped knees and broken toys. She was gone. Had been gone for years, probably. I'd just been too blind to see it. Alice, please, can't we? No. The word came out final as a judge's gavel. We can't. Not right now, maybe not ever. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Through my kitchen window, I watched Cody's silver sedan pull into my driveway with the precision of a funeral procession. Alice sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead like a woman attending her own execution. I opened the door before they could knock. We need to discuss something, Cody announced, holding a manila folder against his chest like a shield. His voice carried the artificial gravity of someone playing lawyer in a community theater production. They arranged themselves at my kitchen table with ceremonial formality. Alice avoided eye contact, focusing instead on smoothing invisible wrinkles from her jacket. Cody placed the folder on the table between us and opened it with theatrical precision. We've prepared a formal settlement agreement, he began, sliding a typed document across the wooden surface. Given the emotional distress you've caused, we believe compensation is warranted. The paper looked official, formatted with bullet points and numbered paragraphs, but reading it felt like watching someone perform surgery with kitchen utensils. Emotional damages in the amount of $20,000, I read aloud, my voice flat with disbelief. That's correct. Cody leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Alice suffered quantifiable psychological harm from your deception. Lost sleep, work performance issues, relationship stress. You're demanding $20,000 because I lied about my pension. Because you manipulated us, Alice interjected, her first words since arriving. You played psychological games with people who loved you. I looked at the document again. Under damages breakdown, they'd itemized everything. Sleepless nights, $500 per incident. Work productivity loss, $200 per day. Emotional trauma counseling, $150 per session. This is ridiculous. It's legally binding, Cody countered, though his understanding of law seemed limited to what he'd seen on television. You caused demonstrable harm. We have documentation. What documentation? Alice shifted uncomfortably. I kept notes about how worried I was, emails to friends about your situation, text messages about researching assistance programs. You kept evidence of caring about your father? Evidence of the damage you caused by lying to us, Cody corrected sharply. This isn't about family anymore, Wayne. You made it a legal matter when you decided to commit fraud. Fraud. The word hit like a slap. Intentional deception for personal gain. You tested our reactions while pretending to be in financial distress. That's fraud. His confidence in legal terminology that made no sense was almost impressive. I'd spent 40 years building bridges and calculating load distributions. I knew the difference between actual engineering and someone throwing around technical terms they didn't understand. You think lying about my pension to my own daughter constitutes fraud? Emotional fraud. It's a recognized legal concept. It wasn't. But arguing seemed pointless. Alice finally looked at me directly. We're not trying to punish you, Dad. We just need acknowledgement that what you did was wrong. The money represents accountability. $20,000 worth of accountability. It's reasonable compensation for what we endured, Cody said. Medical professionals charge more for treating trauma victims. The absurdity was breathtaking. They'd transformed hurt feelings into a business transaction, complete with itemized invoices and settlement demands. What if I refuse? Alice's expression hardened. Then we'll have no choice but to protect ourselves from future manipulation. Meaning, no contact until this is resolved, Cody explained matter-of-factly. Alice can't expose herself to someone who lies about emergencies, and the children certainly can't be around that kind of deceptive behavior. There it was, the grandchildren card, played with surgical precision. Oh, you're threatening to cut me off from my grandchildren unless I pay you $20,000. We're establishing boundaries with someone who's proven untrustworthy, Alice corrected, but her words sounded rehearsed. I stared at the document again. Under terms of resolution, they'd outline payment schedules, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and future behavioral modifications that would allow supervised contact with family members. They'd turned our relationship into a legal contract, literally. I need time to consider this. 48 hours, Cody said immediately. After that, we implement protective measures. Alice stood up, finally showing emotion. Dad, please, just make this right. Pay what you owe, and we can move forward. What I owed? For testing whether my daughter loved me or my money. I watched them leave, their formal documents tucked back into the manila folder like evidence from a crime scene. As Cody's sedan disappeared down the street, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about family anymore. It was war. The call came 40 minutes after I'd refused their ultimatum. Alice's voice carried the mechanical precision of someone reading from a script. Dad, you've made your choice. You need to collect your personal items and leave. Today. Alice, no discussion. You have 2 hours. The line went dead before I could respond. Driving back to her house felt like attending my own funeral. The suburban street looked the same. Tree-lined sidewalks, manicured lawns, children's bicycles scattered on driveways. But everything had changed. Alice opened the door before I could knock. Her expression was carved from marble. Your things are in the guest room in the den, she said without preamble. Family photos, your reading glasses, the books you left here. Take what's yours. Where are the kids? They're here. They need to understand that actions have consequences. I followed her inside, where 8-year-old Emma sat curled on the living room sofa, her arms wrapped around a throw pillow. 6-year-old Michael was building something with blocks on the floor, but his movements were listless, distracted. Grandpa, Emma jumped up and ran to me. Are you staying for dinner? Mom made spaghetti. Alice's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Grandpa's here to pick up his things, sweetheart. He's going home. But why? Emma's voice cracked slightly. He always stays for dinner on Sundays. Not anymore, Alice replied with devastating finality. Grandpa broke our trust, so he can't visit us anymore. I knelt down to Emma's level, fighting to keep my voice steady. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, sweetheart. But I want you to know that Grandpa loves you very much. Are you never coming back? Michael asked, abandoning his blocks. The question hit like a physical blow. I looked at Alice, searching for any trace of the little girl who used to ask me the same question when I left for business trips. She stared back with eyes like winter. "That's up to Grandpa," she said coldly. "When he's ready to make things right, we can talk." Cody emerged from the kitchen, arms crossed, watching the scene with satisfaction. "Better get moving, Wayne. Locksmith will be here in an hour." Locksmith. They were changing the locks before I'd even left. I spent the next 90 minutes gathering fragments of my life from their home, family photos from Christmas mornings, birthday parties, graduations, a coffee mug Emma had made for me in art class, books I'd been reading during visits, reading glasses I'd left on the nightstand. Every item felt weighted with memory and loss. Emma followed me from room to room, her small face etched with confusion. "Why are you taking the picture of us at the zoo?" "So I can remember our fun day together. But it belongs here, we're all together in it." Not anymore, I thought, but couldn't say. Michael appeared in the doorway carrying his favorite book, the one I'd read to him countless times. "Grandpa, you forgot this." "You keep it, buddy. Read it and think of me." His lower lip trembled. "I want you to read it to me." Alice's voice came from behind us, sharp as breaking glass. "That's enough. Kids, go to your rooms." "But Mom..." "Now." They obeyed reluctantly, Emma's eyes brimming with tears she didn't understand. I carried my boxes to the car under Cody's supervision, as if I might steal something of value. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was being treated like a thief by people who just tried to extort $20,000. As I loaded the final box, a white van pulled into the driveway. Spokane Security Locksmith, painted in blue letters on the side. "Right on time," Cody called out cheerfully. "All the exterior locks need changing. Front door, back door, garage." The locksmith nodded and began unloading his equipment. I stood beside my car, keys in hand, watching my own banishment being made permanent. Through the living room window, I could see Emma's face pressed against the glass, her palm flat against the pane. Alice appeared behind her daughter, placed her hands on Emma's shoulders, and guided her away from the window. The curtains closed with quiet finality. I drove to the end of the block and parked, unable to leave immediately. In my rearview mirror, I watched the locksmith work. Drilling out old locks, installing new ones, erasing my access to a life I'd helped build. My phone remained silent. No last-minute calls, no second thoughts, no trace of the daughter who used to call me every week just to chat. 47 years of being Alice's father ended over $20,000 I'd refused to pay for the crime of testing her love. As I finally drove away, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. If they wanted to treat this like a business transaction, then perhaps it was time I started thinking like a businessman too. Thursday morning arrived with unusual clarity. After 3 days of grief that felt like drowning, I woke with singular purpose. The emotions hadn't disappeared, but they'd crystallized into something harder, more useful. Engineering problems required systematic solutions. I'd spent 40 years designing structures that could withstand pressure, calculating load distributions, anticipating points of failure. Family warfare, I realized, followed similar principles. You identified weaknesses, applied pressure strategically, and waited for the inevitable collapse. The yellow pages led me to James Patterson, attorney at law. His downtown office occupied the 3rd floor of a granite building that had weathered Spokane's ups and downs for over a century. Substantial, reliable. Exactly what I needed. Patterson's secretary, a woman with silver hair and steel-rimmed glasses, ushered me into an office lined with legal texts and family law certificates. The man behind the mahogany desk looked to be my age, with the comfortable confidence of someone who'd solve problems for a living. Mr. West. He stood and extended his hand. "Margaret mentioned you had a family law matter?" More complex than typical family law, I suspect. I laid out the entire story methodically. The pension test, Alice's reaction, Cody's manipulation, the $20,000 ultimatum, the banishment from my grandchildren. Patterson listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen against his lips. "Interesting case," he said finally. They demanded compensation for emotional distress caused by your deception, then cut off contact when you refused to pay. Essentially, yes. That's extortion, Mr. West. Textbook extortion. The word hung in the air like a verdict. Can we use that? Potentially, but I'm more interested in their vulnerabilities. Patterson pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. You mentioned your son-in-law works in real estate. Cody Morgan, he's with Clearwater Properties. Real estate agents are licensed professionals. They're subject to ethical standards, regulatory oversight. If we could demonstrate he engaged in extortion, Patterson made a note, that could affect his livelihood. Something cold and satisfied stirred in my chest. What would that require? Documentation? Evidence of the demands? Proof of the threats? He looked up from his notes. Do you still have their written ultimatum? I reached into my jacket and produced the manila folder they'd left with me. The settlement agreement, with its itemized damages and formal language, now looked less intimidating and more incriminating. Patterson read through it slowly, his eyebrows rising incrementally. This is remarkable, he said quietly. They've essentially created a paper trail of attempted extortion. Emotional damages, compensation requirements, enforcement measures. It's like they wrote out a confession. Cody seemed very confident about the legal terminology. Cody doesn't understand legal terminology. Patterson set the papers down with evident satisfaction. This document has no legal standing whatsoever. Worse, it demonstrates intent to coerce payment through threats. What are our options? Patterson pulled out a fresh legal pad and began sketching what looked suspiciously like a battle plan. Several approaches. We could file complaints with the Real Estate Licensing Board about Cody's conduct. We could document the grandchildren access denial for family court. We could even explore civil suits for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I felt the familiar satisfaction of a well-designed project taking shape. What would you recommend? Systematic pressure, like water finding cracks in a foundation. Patterson looked up from his notes. They used your family relationships as leverage. We can use their professional and social relationships the same way. How long would this take? Months, potentially. Legal processes require patience, but thoroughness has its rewards. He leaned forward slightly. The question is, what's your end goal? Punishment, reconciliation, justice? I considered the question while studying the certificates on his wall. 40 years of professional practice. Hundreds of families helped through crisis. A man who understood both law and human nature. I want my daughter back, I said finally. But I want her to choose me freely, not because Cody tells her to. And I want my grandchildren to know their grandfather wasn't the villain in this story. Patterson nodded approvingly. That's achievable. Difficult, but achievable. What do you need from me? Time, money, and your patience while we build a case that gives your daughter clarity about who she married. I left his office an hour later with a retainer agreement, a preliminary strategy, and something I'd lost during those dark days after the banishment, hope. The drive home felt different. Not the defeated retreat of a broken father, but the purposeful movement of a man with plans to execute. Michael Torres operated from a nondescript office above a sandwich shop on Riverside Avenue. The building looked forgettable, which I suspected was intentional. Men in his profession probably valued anonymity. Patterson had recommended him with the understated confidence of someone who knew quality work. 15 years investigating financial fraud for insurance companies, he'd explained. If there's financial misconduct, Michael will find it. The office itself was sparse but organized. 2 filing cabinets, a desk with dual monitors, and walls lined with certificates from investigation associations I'd never heard of. Torres himself looked like an accountant who worked out. Compact, precise, with eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Mr. Patterson explained your situation, he began, settling behind his desk with a yellow legal pad. You want to understand their real financial position. Exactly. I need to know what drove them to demand $20,000 from me. Public records can tell us a lot about someone's financial health. Credit reports, court filings, property records, business licenses. He made notes as he spoke. What's your timeline? I'm not in a hurry. I want thoroughness over speed. Good. Rush jobs miss details. Torres looked up from his pad. Fair warning. Sometimes clients don't like what I find. Financial investigations can reveal uncomfortable truths about people you thought you knew. I'm prepared for that. He quoted his daily rate and estimated time frame, 5 to 7 days for comprehensive background checks on both Alice and Cody. I wrote him a retainer check on the spot. The next week crawled by like a slow-healing wound. I kept busy with yard work and home maintenance, but my mind constantly returned to what Torres might be discovering. Every phone call made me wonder if he'd found something significant. Patterson called twice to check on my state of mind, professional concern disguised as casual conversation. I appreciated the attention to client welfare, even if it felt unnecessary. I'd spent 4 decades managing complex engineering projects. Patience was a learned skill. Friday afternoon brought the call I'd been anticipating. Mr. West, Michael Torres. I have your report ready. Can you come in this afternoon? His office felt different when I returned, more serious somehow. The casual atmosphere had been replaced by something that felt like a doctor's office before receiving test results. Torres had prepared a bound report, professionally typed and organized with tabs separating different sections. He placed it on the desk between us, like evidence in a court case. I'll summarize the key findings, then you can review the details at home. He opened his own copy to the first section. Your daughter and son-in-law are in severe financial distress. How severe? Combined debt of approximately $96,000. Credit cards, personal loans, home equity line of credit maxed out. They're 3 months behind on their mortgage. The number hit like a physical blow. I'd suspected financial problems, but nothing approaching this magnitude. That's not the worst part, Torres continued, turning to another section. Cody has a serious gambling problem. Casino records show losses of over $40,000 in the past 18 months. Online betting accounts show similar patterns. He slid several pages across the desk. Bank statements, credit reports, casino transaction records. The documentation painted a picture of financial catastrophe driven by compulsive gambling. The timeline correlates exactly with their treatment of you, Torres explained, pointing to specific dates. The gambling losses accelerated last fall. Their first approach about your pension happened in March, right after they received foreclosure warnings. They were planning this. The evidence suggests coordinated financial pressure. Your pension represents approximately 50% of their combined monthly income. Without it, they face bankruptcy within 6 months. I studied the casino records. Cody's losses had escalated dramatically over time, following the classic addiction pattern, small bets growing larger, good nights followed by devastating losses, borrowed money chasing previous losses. How did Alice not know about this? She might suspect something, but Cody's been careful. Separate accounts, cash advances, money moved in ways that obscure the gambling connection. Torres pointed to specific transactions. He's sophisticated about hiding the activity, but not sophisticated enough to avoid public records. Exactly. Everything I found comes from legitimate legal sources. Court filings, credit reports, business records. This isn't private information. It's public documentation of financial irresponsibility. I left Torres's office with the report under my arm and a completely different understanding of my situation. Alice hadn't rejected me for testing her love. She'd rejected me for refusing to solve their financial crisis. The $20,000 demand hadn't been about emotional damages. It had been a desperate attempt to buy time before creditors foreclosed on their house and repossessed their cars. My test had worked perfectly. I'd discovered exactly what I'd feared to find. My daughter loved my money more than she loved me, but now I understood why. Tuesday morning found me in Patterson's office reviewing the documents that would change everything. The detective's report lay open between us like a battle plan, its pages bristling with evidence of Alice and Cody's financial desperation. The defamation case is solid, Patterson said, tapping the legal papers with his pen. They publicly claimed you defrauded them. That's textbook defamation when it's demonstrably false. I studied the lawsuit he'd prepared. 15 pages of legal precision, citing specific statements Alice and Cody had made about my financial fraud and emotional manipulation. Every claim documented, every demand for their ridiculous $20,000 now evidence of their extortion attempt. What about the emotional distress component? Even stronger. Cutting off a grandfather's access to his grandchildren over a refused extortion payment? Any jury would see that as intentional infliction of emotional distress. Patterson pulled out another set of documents. I have also prepared complaints for the Real Estate Commission about Cody's conduct. Using extortion tactics while holding a professional license opens him to disciplinary action. The systematic beauty of it impressed me. Like a well-engineered structure, every element supported the others, creating something stronger than the sum of its parts. When do we file? This afternoon. Process server can deliver papers tomorrow. Patterson leaned back in his chair. Fair warning. Once this starts, there's no gentle way to stop it. Legal warfare tends to escalate. They declared war when they demanded $20,000 and stole my grandchildren. I'm just responding in kind. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang with the call I'd been anticipating. Papers delivered, the process server reported. Both defendants present and served simultaneously at their residence. Female became quite upset. Male appeared shocked but tried to maintain composure. I thanked him and hung up, feeling the first warm satisfaction I'd experienced in weeks. Alice and Cody were now defendants in a civil lawsuit, facing potential damages and legal costs that would dwarf their original $20,000 demand. The phone rang again 20 minutes later. Unknown number. Is this Wayne West? A woman's voice, professional but strained. Speaking. This is Jennifer Walsh from Caldwell & Associates. I'm calling regarding the lawsuit filed against Alice Morgan and Cody Morgan. Are you represented by counsel? I am. James Patterson is handling the matter. Mr. West, surely this is something that can be resolved within the family? Litigation is expensive and emotionally costly for everyone involved. I recognize the tone, the same calculated reasonableness Alice had used when demanding compensation for her fake emotional trauma. Ms. Walsh, my daughter and son-in-law, demanded $20,000 from me under threat of cutting off contact with my grandchildren. When I refused their extortion, they followed through on their threats. Now they're facing the legal consequences of those choices. Mr. West, all communication should go through my attorney. Good day. I hung up and immediately called Patterson. They've already hired someone, I reported. Jennifer Walsh from Caldwell & Associates. I know Jenny. Competent but expensive. Your timing was perfect. They're probably paying her with money they don't have. Thursday brought another satisfying development. Patterson called with an update on the Real Estate Commission complaint. They've opened a formal investigation into Cody's conduct. Professional licensing boards take extortion allegations seriously, especially when there's documentation. He paused. There's something else? I received a call from their attorney requesting a settlement conference. Already? They're feeling the pressure. Legal fees, potential damages, professional licensing investigation. The financial stress Torres documented is probably becoming unbearable. I thought about Alice and Cody receiving those legal papers, their confident satisfaction crumbling as they realized the true cost of their greed. The image brought me considerable pleasure. What kind of settlement are they proposing? Nothing specific yet. Jenny Walsh wants to explore mutually acceptable resolution options. Lawyers speak for begging. I'm not interested in settlements. I expected that response, but I want you to consider the strategic value of letting them make an offer. It demonstrates their desperation and potentially provides more evidence of their motivations. Patterson was right, of course. Sun Tzu had written about the importance of letting enemies reveal their weaknesses. Modern legal warfare operated on similar principles. Schedule the conference, I decided. I want to hear what they think their extortion and family destruction is worth. I'll set it up for next week. This should be illuminating. After ending the call, I walked to my living room window and looked out at the neighborhood where I'd lived for 37 years. The same streets where Alice had learned to ride a bicycle, where she'd sold Girl Scout cookies door to door, where she'd brought her own children to visit their grandfather. All of that history, sacrificed for $20,000 they'd never even received. The phone rang one more time that evening. Alice's number appeared on the caller ID. I let it ring. The phone call came Tuesday morning while I was working in my garden. Harold Chen, my neighbor of 15 years and occasional chess partner, sounded uncomfortable. Wayne, I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you doing okay? I mean, really okay? I straightened up from the tomato plants, dirt still clinging to my gardening gloves. I'm fine, Harold. Why do you ask? Well, Alice called yesterday. She seemed really worried about you. He paused, choosing words carefully. She mentioned you've been having some difficulties since Margaret passed. The words hit like cold water. What kind of difficulties? Memory issues, making poor decisions. She said you've been acting strangely and won't accept help. Harold's voice carried genuine concern. Look, Wayne, I've known you for years. You seem perfectly sharp to me, but Alice sounded genuinely frightened. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, pieces clicking into place. Alice wasn't just defending against my lawsuit, she was launching a preemptive strike against my credibility. The strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Paint the grieving widower as mentally unstable, and suddenly his legal actions become the confused lashing out of a man who can't think clearly. Wednesday brought confirmation. 3 more calls from concerned neighbors, 2 from church acquaintances, and 1 from my barber. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Worried inquiries about my mental state based on Alice's concerns. By Thursday, I understood the full scope of their campaign. Mr. West? The voice belonged to Janet Rodriguez from the grocery store where I'd shopped for 20 years. I saw your daughter's Facebook post. I had no idea you were struggling so much. What Facebook post? The one about your condition. She's asking for prayers and advice about how to help elderly parents who won't accept they need assistance. That evening, I created a Facebook account for the first time in my life. Alice's post, shared 2 days earlier, had generated 43 comments and 67 reactions. The language was carefully crafted. Concerned daughter, seeking guidance about a father, experiencing cognitive changes and emotional instability following his wife's death. She'd managed to publicly question my mental competence without making specific medical claims that could be legally challenged. The comments ranged from sympathy for Alice's situation to advice about dealing with difficult seniors and suggestions for involuntary psychiatric evaluations. I screenshotted everything and emailed it to Patterson. Friday brought the most direct confrontation yet. At the hardware store, I encountered Bob Martinez, a contractor I'd worked with on several projects. Wayne, he approached with exaggerated enthusiasm. How are you holding up, buddy? Just fine, Bob, working on some home projects. That's great to hear. His tone suggested he thought otherwise. Alice mentioned you've been having a rough time. Depression, memory problems, really tough stuff. Alice said that? Yeah, she called yesterday. Wanted to make sure I knew to keep an eye on you if you came in for supplies. Said you might make unsafe purchases or forget what you were doing. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. They'd contacted my professional network, systematically undermining relationships built over decades. Bob, do I seem confused or unstable to you right now? He studied my face, uncertainty creeping into his expression. No, honestly, you seem fine. But Alice was really convincing, said you'd have good days and bad days. Alice is currently being sued for extortion and defamation. She has strong motivation to discredit me. Bob's eyebrows rose. You're suing your own daughter? I'm suing someone who demanded $20,000 from me and cut off my access to my grandchildren when I refused to pay. The conversation ended with Bob looking thoroughly confused about who to believe. That evening, Patterson called with an update. The rumor campaign is actually helping our case, he reported. Public statements about your mental state, especially ones that can be proven false, constitute additional defamation. We're documenting everything. It still hurts, I admitted. I understand, but consider this. They've abandoned any pretense of family loyalty. They're publicly attacking your character to avoid legal consequences. It demonstrates exactly the kind of people we're dealing with. He was right, of course. Their willingness to destroy my reputation revealed more about their character than months of legal arguments could accomplish. Saturday morning brought validation in an unexpected form. My old colleague Frank Morrison called, after hearing rumors through mutual acquaintances. Wayne, I heard some concerning things about your mental state. Naturally, I had to call and check for myself. What's your assessment? Frank chuckled. Same sharp engineer I've known for 30 years. Whoever's spreading these stories doesn't know you very well. Your mind is clear as ever. Thank you for checking directly instead of just believing rumors. That's what friends do. But Wayne, whoever's doing this has made a tactical error. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you can see you're completely competent. These claims are so obviously false that they're damaging the credibility of whoever's making them. After ending the call, I realized Frank had identified the fatal flaw in Alice and Cody's strategy. Their desperation had led them to overreach, making claims that anyone could easily verify as false through direct interaction. The Spokane County Courthouse stood like a monument to justice, its granite columns catching morning sunlight as Patterson and I climbed the steps. 3 months had passed since Alice first demanded $20,000 from me. Today we would settle the account. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet professional energy. Alice and Cody sat at the defendant's table with Jennifer Walsh, their expensive attorney looking notably less confident than during our first phone conversation. Alice avoided eye contact, studying her hands as if they held answers to questions she couldn't voice. All rise, the Honorable Judge Patricia Harrison presiding. Judge Harrison, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, took her position behind the bench. She'd spent 20 years in family law before her appointment, Patterson had informed me. Someone who'd seen every variety of family destruction money could create. "We're here today for West versus Morgan," she announced, reviewing her papers. "This is a civil matter involving claims of defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Mr. Patterson, you may proceed with your opening statement." Patterson rose with the controlled confidence of a man holding 4 aces. "Your Honor, this case demonstrates what happens when greed masquerades as family concern. The defendants demanded $20,000 from Mr. West under threat of cutting off his access to his grandchildren. When he refused their extortion, they followed through on their threats and launched a character assassination campaign designed to make him appear mentally incompetent." He gestured toward our evidence table, stacked with documents and bound reports. "The evidence will show that defendants were facing financial ruin due to gambling addiction and poor decisions. They saw Mr. West's pension as their salvation and were willing to destroy a family to access it." Walsh's opening was predictably defensive. "Your Honor, my clients were genuinely concerned about Mr. West's judgment following his wife's death. Their actions, while perhaps misguided, came from love and worry about a family member making poor decisions." Judge Harrison looked unimpressed. "Let's see the evidence, Mr. Patterson." Patterson called Michael Torres to the witness stand first. The detective appeared professional in his dark suit, carrying the bound investigation report that had changed everything. "Mr. Torres, please explain your findings regarding the defendant's financial situation." Torres opened his report with practiced precision. "Your Honor, my investigation revealed combined debts of $96,000. Credit cards, personal loans, home equity lines of credit all maximized. The defendants were 3 months behind on their mortgage at the time they approached Mr. West about his pension. What about gambling activity? Mr. Morgan showed losses exceeding $40,000 over 18 months. Casino records, online betting accounts, cash advances used for gambling purposes, classic addiction pattern with escalating losses." Patterson introduced bank statements, credit reports, and casino transaction records. Each document painted another stroke in the portrait of financial desperation. When did this gambling activity intensify relative to the defendant's treatment of Mr. West? The losses accelerated in fall 2024. Their first approach about his pension occurred in March 2025, immediately following foreclosure warnings from their mortgage company. Walsh's cross-examination proved futile. Torres had done his work thoroughly, legally, and professionally. Every fact came with documentation from public records. Next, Patterson presented evidence of their $20,000 demand. "Your Honor, I present Exhibit G, defendant's written settlement agreement demanding compensation for alleged emotional damages, with itemized breakdown of supposed costs." Judge Harrison studied the document with obvious skepticism. "They charged $500 per sleepless night?" "That's correct, Your Honor. Along with daily work productivity losses and counseling fees for trauma, they claim to have suffered from learning Mr. West's true pension amount." The absurdity of their demands became clear under judicial scrutiny. Walsh shifted uncomfortably as her client's carefully crafted victim narrative crumbled under examination. Patterson then addressed the defamation campaign. "Your Honor, when Mr. West refused their demands, defendants launched a systematic campaign to undermine his credibility by spreading false claims about his mental state. He introduced screenshots of Alice's Facebook posts, witness statements from neighbors who'd received calls about my supposed dementia, and documentation of their attempts to influence my professional network. The defendants claimed Mr. West was suffering from cognitive decline and making irrational decisions. Yet every person who interacted with him directly found these claims obviously false. Frank Morrison testified as a character witness, describing my engineering competence and mental clarity. Harold Chen confirmed Alice's phone calls, spreading rumors about my mental state. Bob Martinez explained how Alice had contacted my professional associates with warnings about my supposed instability. Each witness painted the same picture. Alice and Cody had systematically attempted to destroy my reputation when their extortion failed. Walsh's defense centered on portraying their actions as misguided family concern rather than calculated manipulation. But the evidence spoke too clearly for emotional appeals to overcome factual documentation. Your Honor, she argued desperately, family disputes shouldn't be resolved in courtrooms. These are people who love each other, making mistakes under pressure. Judge Harrison looked from the defendants to the evidence table, then directly at Alice and Cody. I've reviewed all materials presented today. The defendants' claims of acting from family concern are contradicted by their own documented actions. Demanding specific monetary compensation for emotional distress, combined with threats to withhold grandchildren access, constitutes extortion regardless of family relationships. My chest tightened with anticipation. Furthermore, the systematic campaign to spread false information about Mr. West's mental capacity represents clear defamation with malicious intent. The defendant's financial desperation provides obvious motive for these actions. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. I find in favor of the plaintiff. Defendants will pay compensatory damages of $15,000 plus court costs and attorney fees. Additionally, defendants are enjoined from making further defamatory statements about Mr. West's character or mental capacity. The gavel fell with finality that echoed through the quiet courtroom. 3 weeks after the verdict, I was working in Margaret's garden when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Alice standing on my porch, holding Emma's hand. No Cody in sight. My granddaughter wore the blue dress Margaret had bought her last Christmas, the one with small flowers that made her look like spring incarnate. Alice looked different, smaller somehow. The polished confidence I'd grown accustomed to had been replaced by something more fragile. I opened the door. Dad. Her voice carried none of its former authority. May we come in? I need to talk to you. Emma looked up at me with 8-year-old confusion. Grandpa? Why haven't you visited us? The question cut deeper than any legal argument. It's complicated, sweetheart. Alice knelt beside her daughter. Emma, why don't you play in Grandpa's backyard? I think he still has that swing your grandmother loved. After Emma skipped away, Alice and I faced each other in the living room where this had all begun. The afternoon light caught dust motes floating between us like suspended possibilities. I brought the first payment, she said, pulling a cashier's check from her purse. $1,500. The full amount will take me 10 months to pay. I took the check, but didn't look at it. Alice, you didn't need to bring this personally. Yes, I did. She sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly. Dad, I need to say something I should have said months ago. I waited. I'm sorry. The words came out broken, like something that had been rehearsed but felt raw in the speaking. I'm sorry for what I did to you, to our family, to everything Mom built with us. Alice, please let me finish. Tears started, and she didn't try to hide them. I chose money over you. I let Cody convince me that your pension was somehow ours to manage. I demanded payment for being hurt when you tested me, but the truth is, you were right to test me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture I remembered from her childhood. I failed that test completely. I proved that I loved your money more than I loved you, and when you wouldn't pay us, I tried to destroy your reputation to win a lawsuit. The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we could cross. What changed? I asked quietly. Losing. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Losing the case, losing the money, losing respect from everyone who knew what I'd done. But mostly, losing Emma and Michael's questions about why Grandpa doesn't come around anymore. Through the window, I could see Emma pushing herself on Margaret's old swing, her dress billowing like a flower in the wind. Cody and I are separated, Alice continued. I found out about the gambling after the trial. All those debts, all that desperation. I understand now why he pushed so hard for your money, but understanding doesn't excuse what I chose to do. Where is he now? Staying with his brother. The real estate commission suspended his license pending investigation. He'll probably have to find new work." She paused. "I should have protected you from him instead of helping him attack you." I studied my daughter's face, looking for traces of the manipulation I'd grown to expect. Instead, I saw exhaustion, genuine remorse, and something that looked like the Alice I'd raised before greed complicated everything. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong, and I want Emma and Michael to know their grandfather, even if you can never trust me again." The last words came out barely above a whisper. I walked to the window and watched Emma discover the bird feeder Margaret had installed near the swing. My granddaughter's delight at the cardinals and finches reminded me why family mattered, despite its capacity for inflicting pain. "Alice, do you remember what I told you when you were 16 and stole money from your mother's purse?" She nodded. "You said that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, but it can be rebuilt if both people want it enough. Do you want it enough? More than anything?" I turned back to face her. "Then we'll try, slowly, carefully, with new rules and clear boundaries." "What kind of rules?" "No discussions about my finances, no assumptions about inheritance, no manipulation or emotional blackmail. And most importantly, Emma and Michael come first in any decision we make." Alice nodded emphatically. "Yes, all of that. I agree completely. And Alice, things will never be the same as they were before. That innocence is gone forever." "I know." She wiped fresh tears. "But maybe we can build something better, something more honest." Emma burst through the back door, cheeks flushed with outdoor play. "Grandpa, can you come push me on the swing? I can't go high enough by myself." I looked at Alice, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's go swing." As we walked toward the backyard together, I realized that justice and forgiveness weren't opposites. They were partners in the difficult work of rebuilding what broken people had damaged. The swing creaked with familiar music as Emma soared toward the sky, her laughter mixing with birdsong, and the whisper of wind through Margaret's carefully tended roses. Some things, once broken, could indeed be repaired. Not the same, but perhaps, with enough care and time, something even stronger. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. 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 Thank you for watching.